Welcome to the Deep Dive, your essential shortcut to understanding the complex world of cybersecurity operations.
Great to be here.
Today, we are undertaking a pretty massive mission, peeling back the curtain on CISSP Domain-7. That's the core of security operations.
It really is the core.
If you've spent your time focused on theoretical architecture, maybe setting up governance frameworks, designing those beautiful policies, that's all necessary stuff.
Absolutely vital groundwork.
But Domain-7 is where all that planning kind of collides with reality, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. This is the day-to-day.
This is the practical guide to cybersecurity, the actual operations needed to maintain security controls, handle incidents when they pop up, and make sure confidentiality, integrity, and availability, the good old CIA triad, are actually upheld when the clocks are ticking.
That's spot on. Our goal in this deep dive really is to distill the key objectives of this domain. We're talking everything from the foundations, like change management, all the way to the high-stakes world of incident response, digital forensics, even full disaster recovery strategies.
So we're aiming to give you the blueprint for managing risk daily, not just designing for it once and forgetting it.
Exactly. It's about the ongoing process. And the key insight, I think, the thing we really want you to leave with is this. You use technology, obviously, to enforce security.
Sure, the tools.
But successful security operations, they're fundamentally defined by robust, documented policies, procedures, and crucially, the response sequences your people actually follow.
It's the processes, not just the fancy firewalls, that ultimately keep the business safe.
Precisely. The human and procedural element is huge here.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning of that operational cycle. Let's focus on maintaining security consistency and preventing what we sometimes call security drift.
Ah, yes. Drift, where things slowly fall out of line.
Exactly. Where systems slowly fall out of compliance, maybe due to neglect or unauthorized tweaks. And right at the top of preventing that drift sits change management, or CM.
Right. CM might sound like, just bureaucratic paperwork. Another ticket queue.
Yeah, bit of a chore.
But honestly, it's one of the most vital security controls you can have. Its entire purpose is stopping outages, or worse, accidentally weaken security that comes from authorized changes that just weren't vetted properly.
Okay, so we're not just talking about like massive infrastructure overhauls here.
Oh, no, not at all. We mean any change, seriously. An update to a firewall rule, apply a patch, upgrading an application, even just changing an internal policy document.
Really? Even policy docs?
Yep. Every single change needs to go through a tightly controlled environment. It's got to be documented, discussed by the right stakeholders, approved by management, and this is key. Tested.
Tested before production, presumably.
Absolutely. Often in a staging or some kind of isolated environment before it ever gets near your live systems.
And what if that testing fails? Or maybe it passes testing, but then it causes some unexpected outage in production. Happens all the time.
It does, and that's precisely why the concept of the rollback plan is your critical safety net. Can't stress this enough.
Okay.
Every single change request, I don't care how small it seems, must detail the steps required to immediately revert the system back to its last known good configuration.
So you can undo it quickly if something goes wrong.
Exactly. If you don't have a rollback plan, you're basically risking catastrophic downtime. Imagine applying some, seemingly simple network patch, and it accidentally opens up a critical vulnerability or, bang, crashes your main database. If you don't have that documented, tested, ready-to-go rollback plan, well, you could be looking at huge losses, millions potentially. The plan makes the whole process auditable and, frankly, safe.
That connects directly into configuration management, CM, doesn't it? Which is all about making sure things are consistent. How do we ensure that consistency across, I don't know, maybe thousands of devices?
Yeah, that's the challenge. And this is where baselining becomes absolutely essential.
Baselining, okay. Tell us more.
Baselining just means establishing a common, approved, secure starting point for your configurations. Often you do this using golden images for servers or maybe standardized policy enforcement tools like group policy or something similar.
Right, like a template.
Exactly. But as you mentioned earlier, systems experience that shift and drift.
That's such a great term for it. What does that shift and drift actually look like in, the real world?
It's that slow, quiet erosion of your security posture. It happens bit by bit. Maybe an admin makes a quick manual change on one server to fix some urgent bug.
Temporary fix.
Right. Or a developer temporarily opens a port for testing and, whoops, forgets to close it. Or maybe a patch installation fails silently on a few machines. Over months, these little deviations stack up.
And the system is no longer secure, according to the plan.
Precisely. It no longer matches the approved baseline, leaving it vulnerable. So, to fight this, your security operations absolutely require continuous scanning, or at least periodic scanning, to check that configurations are still aligned with that baseline. You got to catch the drift before it leads to a breach.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's move from the technology controls to the human controls, personnel security controls. These are specifically designed to fight things like internal threats, collusion, maybe just plain old human error.
Yeah, and this really highlights that security isn't just a tech problem, right? We're talking about administrative controls here. And probably the most fundamental one is separation of duties, SOD.
OT.
The principle is actually pretty simple. No single person should have all the permissions or rights needed to execute a critical, high-risk function completely on their own.
Can you give us a really clear example of where SOD applies?
Oh, sure. The classic example is in the software development lifecycle. A programmer, they should write the code, obviously, but they should be restricted from modifying the production code base directly. That's key. You'd have a separate quality assurance team test it, and then maybe a different operations team actually deploys it to the live environment.
So multiple eyes, multiple hands.
Exactly. This stops a malicious programmer, or even just a negligent one, from introducing a flaw or a backdoor into the live system without at least one other person having to sign off or do the final step.
And so VD works really well with job rotation, doesn't it?
It does, precisely. Job rotation is actually quite elegant because it does a couple of things at once. First, it gives you redundancy. If an employee leaves suddenly or is just unavailable, someone else can step in and the organization keeps running.
Business continuity aspect.
Right. But second, and this is crucial for security ops, it serves as a really powerful detective control.
How so?
Well, if an employee is involved in some kind of fraudulent activity, rotating them out of that position means their work gets exposed to a fresh pair of eyes. And that new person might spot inconsistencies or suspicious patterns that the first person was, carefully hiding.
Makes sense. And connected to that, probably the most famous audit control of all, mandatory vacations.
Yeah.
This one always gets people talking.
Oh, yeah, it's a classic for a good reason. Think about it. Employees who are committing ongoing fraud. Maybe like a salami attack where they're shaving tiny amounts off many accounts.
Right, death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly. They often really resist taking time off. Why? Because their constant presence is needed to maintain the scam, maybe manually suppress alerts or fix things that might look odd.
So the vacation forces someone else to do their job.
Precisely. And the consensus in auditing best practices is usually requiring 2 contiguous weeks off, not just a day here or there.
2 full weeks.
Yeah, that extended period pretty much guarantees someone else has to take over all their duties, which tends to flesh out any suspicious patterns or policy violations the fraudster was managing to keep hidden.
Okay, one last thing in this foundational section. Service level agreements, SLAs. Why do these contractual things matter in a security operations context?
SLAs, they guarantee a certain minimum level of service, maybe 99.99% uptime for a critical app, for example.
The nines.
Right, the famous nines. From a security operations view, they're actually incredibly valuable tools. Why? Because they force the organization to identify key measurable metrics.
Ah, okay. Quantifiable goals.
Exactly. If the business side demands, say, 99.999% availability, 5 nines, well, that directly justifies the budget you need for really expensive controls. Things like active replication, hot sites, dedicated 24/7 staffing.
Stuff that's hard to get budget for otherwise.
Totally. SLAs turn these abstract security requirements into concrete contractual needs that justify resources. They force IT and the business units to sit down and actually agree on what acceptable risk and performance look like.
All right, so we've laid the procedural and administrative groundwork. Now let's dive into the core technical toolkit that security ops teams use every day. And the guiding philosophy here has to be defense in depth.
Absolutely. Defense in depth is basically acknowledging that no single security control is perfect. No silver bullets.
Right.
So you have to layer multiple controls, administrative, physical, technical, and ideally, they shouldn't depend on each other. You want overlapping zones of protection. It builds resilience.
So if one layer fails,
the next layer hopefully catches the attack. Yeah.
can you give us a practical example of how that layering might work?
Sure. Think about a common phishing attempt. Layer 1 might be the administrative control that's your user security awareness training. Teach people not to click.
Okay, the human layer.
Right. But say the user clicks anyway. Layer 2 is a technical control. Maybe your secure email gateway blocks the malicious link or attachment. But maybe the link gets through somehow. Layer 3 could be your endpoint detection and response EDR software on the user's machine, blocking the malware payload from actually executing. And let's say even that fails, and it installs some kind of remote access tool. Layer 4 might be network segmentation, another technical control preventing that compromised machine from moving laterally across the network to infect other systems.
Got it. So each failure relies on the next control down the line.
Exactly. It prevents a single point of failure from becoming a catastrophe.
Okay, let's move to the network edge, the border patrol. Firewalls. Everyone sort of knows they filter traffic, but we really need to focus on stateful inspection. Why is that concept so fundamental now?
Stateful inspection was a huge leap beyond simple packet filtering. A basic filter just looks at the header of one packet at a time, an isolation source IP, destination IP, port number. That's it.
Pretty dumb, relatively speaking.
Yeah, kind of. But stateful inspection, I like to call it the nosy neighbor approach. It tracks the entire life cycle of a connection. It does this by maintaining something called a state table.
Okay, a state table. What's it actually tracking in there that makes it smarter?
It's tracking the connection's progress through the defined TCP states. So when a user starts a connection, the firewall logs the SYN packet, then the SYN ACK response, then the final ACK. It keeps track of expected sequence numbers, acknowledgement numbers, all the conversational bits of TCP.
Sure.
So if another packet arrives later that doesn't logically fit the known established state of that specific connection, like, say, a packet with a spoofed source IP trying to inject data without ever doing the handshake.
Right, doesn't belong in that conversation.
Exactly. The stateful firewall sees that, says, nope, doesn't match my table, and drops it. This prevents a lot of classic attacks, IP spoofing, some session hijacking attempts, certain denial of service attacks that exploit half-open connections, things a simple packet filter would completely miss.
And nowadays, we mostly talk about NGFWs, next-generation firewalls.
Yeah.
How do they fit into the operational picture beyond just that state tracking?
NGFWs basically bundle several critical security functions that used to require separate boxes, separate appliances.
Consolidation.
Right. Most importantly, they almost always include an integrated intrusion prevention system, IPS engine, right there in the firewall itself, and they usually have application and user awareness.
Okay, application awareness.
Yeah.
What does that mean in practice? It's not just looking at port 80 for web traffic anymore.
Exactly. A traditional firewall would just see traffic on port 80 or 443 and say, okay, web traffic, let it through. An NGFW can look deeper into the packet payload and recognize, oh, this isn't just web traffic, this is specifically Skype or Facebook or SharePoint or even, BitTorrent.
So you can create much more granular rules.
Precisely. And for operational security, this is huge. You can enforce policies based on the application, not just the port. You could say, allow our corporate users to access Facebook, sure, but block them from using the embedded video chat feature within Facebook.
Okay, that's powerful. Allows the business function, but minimizes a specific risk vector.
Exactly. That fine-grained control is a game changer for security teams trying to balance usability and security. Oh, and one critical rule for any firewall, basic or NGFW.
Yes.
The default security posture must always be implicit deny.
Meaning
if a packet isn't explicitly allowed by a specific rule you've written, it gets denied, blocked, dropped. You only allow what you absolutely need.
Default deny.
Yeah.
Got it. This seems like a good point to clarify the difference between IDS and IPS, detection versus prevention. It sounds similar, but they're operationally quite different.
Very different rules. An IDS, an intrusion detection system, is passive. Think of it like a security camera. It sits off to the side, usually gets a mirrored copy of the network traffic using a network tap or a span port on a switch, and it observes. It looks for anomalies or known malicious signatures in that traffic.
And if it sees something?
It generates an alert, sends a message to the security team saying, hey, I saw something suspicious. But it doesn't actually stop the traffic. It just detects and reports.
And you have different types, right? Host-based and network-based.
Yep. HIDS runs on individual machines, monitoring system files, logs, process activity on that specific host. NIDS watches the network traffic on the wire. Both feed alerts, typically.
Okay, so IDS is the camera. What's the IPS?
The IPS intrusion prevention system is the active police officer standing in the road.
Okay. In line.
Exactly. It has to be placed in line, meaning all the traffic you want to protect must pass directly through it, usually right after the firewall. It actively examines that traffic in real time.
And if it sees a threat?
If it detects a known threat signature, or maybe some anomalous behavior it's flagged as malicious, it automatically intervenes. It can block the packet, drop the whole connection, reset it, whatever its rules say. It prevents the threat from reaching the target system.
So much more active, but also carries a risk, right? False positives.
That's the trade-off. Because it's inline, if an IPS mistakenly identifies legitimate traffic as malicious, a false positive, it will block it, potentially causing an outage or disrupting a business process. Tuning an IPS is critical.
Okay, so we have firewalls, IDS, IPS, endpoints, all generating logs and alerts. Where does a security team possibly make sense of this absolute flood of data?
Yeah, it's a deluge. That's where the Security Information and Event Management SIEM system comes in. The SIEM is like the central brain for security
The
data.
aggregation point.
Exactly. It collects logs, events, alerts from pretty much everything: firewalls, IDSs, servers, endpoints, applications, you name it. But aggregation isn't even the main value. The real power of a SIEM is its ability to correlate those disparate events.
Connect the dots.
Precisely. A single failed login on one server. Probably just noise. Someone forgot their password. But maybe that failed login is immediately followed by a firewall alert showing outbound traffic from that same server to a known malicious IP address in, say, North Korea. And then an endpoint alert fires saying a suspicious process was just terminated on that server.
Okay, now that looks like a pattern.
Right. The SIEM correlates those events across different systems and timeframes, turning what looked like random noise into a clear signal. Hey, we likely have an active incident here.
That correlation task, though, looking across millions, maybe billions of events per day, that sounds completely impossible for humans to do effectively.
It is, honestly. Analyzing security events at modern scales is fundamentally a non-human scale problem. You just can't throw enough analysts at it.
Which leads us directly to AML and threat intelligence, I assume.
Absolutely essential. AI and machine learning are critical now for building robust behavior profiles.
Behavior profiles.
Yeah, on everything, really. On users, on applications, on servers, on network flows. The system learns what's normal.
How does it build that baseline and then use it?
It tracks patterns over time. What time does this user normally log in? From what geographic locations? What systems do they typically access? How much data do they usually transfer? Which applications do they run?
So it establishes a baseline of normal activity.
Exactly. Then, if that user suddenly logs in from, I don't know, a completely new country at 3 a.m. local time and immediately tries to download a terabyte of sensitive customer data.
Big red flag.
Huge red flag. The AI detects that sharp deviation, that anomaly from the established norm, and flags it with high confidence, even if it doesn't match a known malware signature. This kind of anomaly detection is vital for next-gen anti-malware, for SIEM correlation, and for improving IDS accuracy.
And feeding into all these detection systems is threat intelligence. What exactly is that?
Threat intelligence is basically evidence-based knowledge about existing or emerging threats. We're not talking vague guesses. We're talking concrete, actionable data points.
Like what?
Specific IP addresses known to be used by attackers, file hashes of known malware samples, detailed tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPs used by specific adversary groups, known vulnerabilities being actively exploited, that kind of thing.
And security teams use this how?
This intelligence is crucial for proactively updating defenses. You feed those malicious IPs into your firewall block list, the malware hashes into your endpoint protection, the TTPs into your detection rules in the SIM or IDs. Security operations teams often follow the formal intelligence cycle: define requirements, what do we need to know? Collection, gather the data, analysis, make sense of it, and finally dissemination. Get it into the tools, into the people who need it.
Okay, let's wrap up this section with a couple of more unusual tools security teams sometimes use. Honeypots and tar pits. Sounds intriguing.
They are pretty interesting. A honeypot is basically a decoy. It's an intentionally vulnerable system, maybe a fake server, a fake database, even a whole fake network segment that's designed purely to attract attackers.
Why would you want to attract attackers?
Purely for intelligence gathering. It's not there for protection. It's there to be attacked. Security teams watch what the attacker does to the honeypot. What tools do they use? What vulnerabilities do they exploit first? What are their TTPs? Where do they try to go next?
So you learn about your enemy by watching them in a controlled environment.
Exactly. That intelligence then feeds back into strengthening your real defenses. But Crucial warning here.
Yes.
If you set up a honeypot, it must be rigorously isolated and segmented from your actual production network. Absolutely no way for an attacker to jump from the honeypot to your live systems. It cannot be a stepping stone.
That sounds critical. Is there a name for a more hardened version?
Sometimes you hear the term padded cell. That's often used to describe a more specialized, highly monitored, hardened environment where you might redirect an attacker after you've detected them elsewhere to contain them and observe them more deeply without them realizing they're being watched.
Okay. And the tar pit, how's that different?
A tar pit is less about observation and more about deterrence, specifically against automated scanning. It's designed to look vulnerable or interesting to scanners. But when the scammer tries to connect or probe a port, the tar pit responds incredibly slowly, painfully slowly.
What's the point of that?
Most automated attack tools, like worms or scanners, are programmed to move fast. If a target doesn't respond quickly, they often just time out and move on to the next IP address. A tar pit essentially causes these automated tools to get stuck, to time out, effectively slowing down, or even completely halting large-scale automated reconnaissance against your network perimeter. It wastes the attacker's time and resources.
Okay, so despite all those defenses, sometimes the bad guys get through. When that happens, we shift gears into the often high-stress world of incident response, or IR.
Right, the fire drill phase.
Exactly. And there's a canonical incident response lifecycle we need to walk through. This is really foundational knowledge, often shown as 7 steps, usually based on the NIST or CISSP model. Knowing this order is absolutely critical for managing an incident effectively.
It really is. You need to know where you are in the process. The steps generally are preparation first, obviously, then identification detection, then containment, followed by eradication, then recovery, then remediation. And finally, the crucial post-incident step, lessons learned.
Preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, remediation, lessons learned.
Got it. Memorize that order. It comes up all the time.
Okay, focusing on that second step, identification and detection. We need to be clear on the difference between a precursor and an indicator. What's the distinction?
Good point. A precursor is like an early warning sign. It suggests someone might be planning or preparing an attack against you that hasn't actually struck yet.
Like reconnaissance.
Exactly. Maybe you detect an unfamiliar IP address running a vulnerability scanner against your public web servers. They're scoping you out, checking for weaknesses. That's a precursor.
Okay. And an indicator.
An indicator, on the other hand, is a sign that an incident might be happening right now or has already happened. Things like a huge unexpected spike in database read activity, or multiple failed login attempts on an admin account that's usually dormant, or maybe antivirus detecting malware on a server. Those are indicators. And, for any of this detection and analysis to actually work, especially when you're trying to correlate events across different systems,
Yes.
security operations depend on one really simple but absolutely critical technical rule.
Yes.
All your systems, all your hosts, must have synchronized clocks. Usually you maintain this using the network time protocol, NTP.
Why is clock sync so important?
Imagine your firewall log says a suspicious connection happened at exactly 1.000.00 a.m., but your web server log shows the related file access happened at 1.00.45 a.m. because its clock is off.
Makes correlation impossible.
Completely impossible. You can't build an accurate timeline of events. The investigation basically dies right there if the clocks aren't synced to a reliable source. It's fundamental.
Okay, so we've identified an incident using indicators and correlated logs. Now we have to prioritize. If multiple alarms are going off, how do security teams decide which fire to fight first?
Prioritization almost always comes down to business impact. What's the immediate and expected damage to the organization?
How do you measure that impact?
It's usually a combination of factors. First, the functional impact. Is a critical business service down? Is manufacturing stopped? Can customers place orders? Second, the information impact. Was sensitive data potentially compromised, stolen, or altered? Think PII, financial data, intellectual property. And third, you consider the recoverability effort. How hard is this going to be to fix?
And sensitive data compromise usually jumps to the front of the line.
Almost always, yes. An incident involving an active breach of sensitive TII or critical IP is generally going to take precedence over, say, a localized disruption affecting a non-critical internal service.
Okay, now here's what you called the aha moment earlier. The crucial decision point that often feels counterintuitive, especially when you first learn it. Let's say you detect an active breach, and you suspect sensitive customer data is being exfiltrated right now. What is the absolute immediate first step? Is it pulling the network cable? Is it shutting down the server to stop the bleeding?
The gut instinct for a tech person might be, pull the plug, stop the data loss.
Right, containment.
But no, in that specific situation, potential breach of sensitive data, the required first step before you touch anything is to notify senior management and legal counsel immediately.
Management and legal first. Why?
Because the moment sensitive data is involved, legal and regulatory obligations kick in. Think GDPR notification timelines, IPay breach reporting, contractual requirements with partners or customers. Disconnecting systems prematurely might stop the immediate data flow, sure, but it could also destroy crucial volatile evidence needed for forensics. Think RAM contents. It could complicate your legal reporting duties. It might even violate a legal hold if litigation is anticipated, which is a serious issue. Legal counsel must be involved immediately to advise on the appropriate course of action, balancing containment with evidence preservation and compliance before you start shutting things down or altering systems.
That makes a lot of sense. The goal instantly shifts from just technical containment to ensuring legal admissibility and compliance down the road.
Precisely. It's a huge operational shift in mindset when sensitive data is involved.
Okay, so assuming you've got the go-ahead from legal and management, then you move to containment.
Right. Now, the goal is to stop the bleeding, to limit the scope of the incident, while still preserving evidence as much as possible. This means isolating the affected systems or network segments.
How do you isolate?
It could be logical isolation, maybe changing firewall rules, putting the affected machine into a restricted VLAN. Or, if necessary and advised, it could be physical isolation, like unplugging the network cable. But again, only after considering the evidence preservation angle.
Once contained, then you eradicate.
Yes. Eradication is about systematically removing the threat itself. This means deleting malicious files, disabling or removing compromised user accounts, patching the vulnerability that allowed the attacker in the first place, getting rid of the root cause on the affected systems.
Okay, threat removed. Next up are recovery and remediation. What's the difference between those two? They sound similar.
They are related but distinct phases. Recovery is the immediate process of getting the affected systems back to normal operation as quickly as possible. This usually involves restoring from known good backups, maybe deploying clean golden images to rebuild servers, applying necessary patches. It's about restoring service.
Getting the lights back on.
Exactly. Remediation, on the other hand, is the longer-term fix. It happens after the immediate crisis is over. Remediation involves deep root cause analysis, why did this happen, and then applying systemic long-term fixes to prevent this specific type of incident from ever happening again. This might involve changing fundamental architecture, updating policies, implementing new security controls.
So recovery is fast restoration, remediation is long-term prevention.
You got it.
And the final step in the cycle, the one you said often gets missed.
Lessons learned. Arguably the most important step for actually improving security, but yeah, it's amazing how often it gets skipped in the rush to get back to normal.
What happens in lessons learned?
It requires dedicated postmortem meetings. You need to bring everyone involved back together, IT, security, the affected business units, legal, management. Review the entire incident timeline from detection to recovery. What worked well, what didn't? Where did procedures fail? Where were the communication breakdowns?
And the outcome?
The outcome should be concrete. Actionable updates to your incident response plan, your playbooks, your security policies, maybe even your technical controls or monitoring. Without this formal feedback loop, you're basically doomed to repeat the same mistakes. The lessons learned phase directly feeds back into the preparation phase for the next incident.
All right, let's say the incident was serious enough that it might lead to criminal charges or maybe a civil lawsuit. Now we transition into the very rigorous, very precise world of digital forensics.
Yeah, this is where the process needs to be absolutely meticulous. Digital forensics is the systematic methodology used to acquire, preserve, analyze, and present digital evidence.
Acquire, preserve, analyze, present.
Right. And the entire discipline, every step, is geared towards one critical goal: ensuring that the evidence is handled so carefully that its integrity and its admissibility in a court of law cannot be successfully challenged.
Okay, integrity and admissibility. Which brings us straight to what you mentioned earlier as potentially the single most critical legal requirement here, the chain of custody.
Absolutely paramount. If the chain of custody is broken at any point, that evidence is likely inadmissible. It becomes legally worthless, no matter how damning it might seem.
So what exactly is the chain of custody?
It's a detailed chronological log or audit trail. It must meticulously document every single person who handled or had possession of any piece of evidence, whether it's a physical hard drive or a digital file copy.
What details need to be logged?
Everything. The date and time it was collected or transferred, where it was stored, who had it, why they had it, what they did with it, and the condition or state of the evidence at each point for digital evidence. This often includes calculating and recording cryptographic hash values, like SHA-256, at each step to prove the data hasn't been altered.
So it proves that the USB drive presented in court is the exact same USB drive collected at the scene, and the data on it hasn't been tampered with.
Exactly. Unbroken chain equals trustworthy evidence.
And for that evidence to actually be used in court, it needs to meet 3 classic legal requirements for admissibility.
What are they? Right, the evidence must be 1. Relevant, meaning it has to actually relate to the specific facts being disputed in the case. 2. Material, meaning it has to be significant or important enough to potentially influence the outcome of the case. And 3. Competent.
Competent.
Competent means it must have been legally obtained, no illegal searches, it must be reliable, and its authenticity must be established, which usually comes back to that unbroken chain of custody and proving accepted forensic methodologies were used. Relevant, material, and competent.
Got it. Now, when collecting digital evidence, there's also a strict order you have to follow based on volatility. You collect the most fragile stuff first, right?
Absolutely. Data disappears quickly, especially when power is lost. You have to collect evidence in order from most volatile to least volatile.
What's the typical order?
Generally, you start with the absolute most volatile stuff,
Yes.
CPU registers and cache memory content. Then you move to the system's physical memory, the RAM. You need to dump the contents of RAM before powering down the machine.
Okay, cache, registers, RAM. Then what?
Then you look at things like live network connection status, running processes. After that, you move to data stored on hard drives or SSDs, then maybe data from remote logging servers. And finally, you get to the least volatile stuff like physical configuration documents, archived backups, printouts.
So powering down a system too early is a forensic sin because you lose everything in RAM.
Huge mistake. Destroys critical evidence that might contain encryption keys, passwords, running malware code, chat logs, all sorts of vital clues. Volatility dictates the collection order.
Let's quickly touch on the 3 main types of evidence that are generally recognized in trials.
Sure. We usually categorize evidence as real evidence, this is tangible, physical objects, like the actual compromised hard drive itself, a USB stick found at the scene, maybe the damaged server rack.
Okay, physical stuff.
Second is documentary evidence. These are written or printed materials. Think printed email records, system log file reports that you've printed out, written company policies, contracts, network diagrams.
Written record.
And third is testimonial evidence. This is the sworn testimony, the verbal or written statements given by witnesses, expert witnesses like the forensic investigator explaining their findings, or employees who were involved or observed something relevant.
Real, documentary, testimonial. Okay, now investigations often involve interviewing people, which require some specific soft skills, right? Particularly during these investigative interviews. What are some best practices for security pros conducting these interviews? They can be tricky.
They can be very tricky. First rule, always go in with a plan. Know what information you need to get. Second, maintain absolute objectivity. Your job is to gather facts, not to accuse or prove guilt. Let the evidence speak.
Okay, what about recording?
Generally, it's advisable to avoid recording the interview, at least initially. The presence of a recorder can often have a chilling effect, making people less candid or more defensive. It's usually better to have a dedicated, skilled note-taker present instead, capturing the conversation accurately.
Good tip. Anything else?
Yes. Crucially, you must compartmentalize information. Never share what one interviewee told you with another interviewee.
Why not?
It prevents collusion, stops people from tailoring their stories based on what others have said. It also allows you, the investigator, to test the consistency and reliability of each person's statement against the known facts and against what others have independently told you.
Okay.
Keep everyone's information separate.
Okay, compartmentalize. Makes sense. Finally, for this section, the source material mentions 6 common classification types for computer crime categories. Understanding the attacker's motive can sometimes help guide the response, right?
Yeah, knowing the why can be useful. The categories usually outlined are military intelligence attacks, often state-sponsored espionage, stealing secrets for national advantage, business attacks, corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets, disrupting competitors, financial attacks, focused purely on monetary gain, credit card theft, bank fraud, ransomware. Then you have terrorist attacks, aiming to disrupt critical infrastructure, cause fear, or make a political statement. Grudge attacks, revenge or sabotage, often by disgruntled current or former employees. And finally, thrill attacks, done for the challenge, for notoriety, or just for kicks without a financial or political motive.
Military, business, financial, terrorist, grudge, thrill.
Right. And understanding that spectrum of motives, sometimes summarized as assessing the attacker's motive, opportunity, and means, or MOM, is a key part of effective threat modeling and incident analysis.
All right, let's move into planning for the really big disruptions, the worst-case scenarios. This is a major pillar of security operations as well. We need to clearly draw the line between BCP, business continuity planning, and DRP, disaster recovery planning. People often use them interchangeably, but they're different.
They are definitely different, and the distinction is important. BCP, business continuity planning, is the broader, more strategic, organization-wide effort. It's focused on the survival of the entire business and ensuring that critical business functions can continue operating after any kind of significant disruption.
Any kind? Like what?
Could be anything. A major flood, a fire, a pandemic, a regional power outage, a key supplier going bankrupt, a severe economic downturn, or, yes, a major cyber attack. BCP looks at the whole business process.
Okay, broad scope. So what's DRP?
DRP, disaster recovery planning, is narrower and much more technology-focused. It's the sibling plan that deals specifically with how to restore the IT infrastructure, the systems, the data, and the connectivity needed to support those critical business functions after a disaster or catastrophic IT incident occurs.
So DRP is a component of BCP focused on the IT recovery.
Exactly. Security operations leadership is usually heavily involved in or even drives the DRP effort, and they provide critical input and technical details to the overall BCP team.
Okay. And all this planning, BCP and DRP, is fundamentally driven by the findings of the Business Impact Analysis, BIA. The BIA dictates 4 absolutely critical metrics that basically govern how fast we need to recover and how much data loss is acceptable.
That's right. These metrics are the foundation. First, you have MTD, the maximum tolerable downtime.
MTD.
This is the absolute longest period the business can survive without a specific critical function before facing truly catastrophic failure. Think bankruptcy, irreparable reputational damage, regulatory fines. MTD is often measured in days or even weeks for some functions, maybe only hours for others. It's the absolute deadline.
Okay, the drop-dead point. What's next?
Next is the RTO, the recovery time objective. This is the target time within the MTD by which you must have the affected systems, services, and functions back up and running after a disaster strikes.
So if the MTD for our ordering system is 24 hours, the business might set an RTO of, say, 4 hours.
Exactly. The RTO is the operational target the DRP has to be designed to meet. If the business says RTO is 4 hours, then the security and IT teams need to engineer a recovery solution, maybe involving a hot site that can actually achieve that 4-hour recovery.
Okay. Third metric, the one often confused with RTO, is RPO, Recovery Point Objective.
Right. RPO is all about data loss. It defines the maximum acceptable amount of data loss the business can tolerate, measured in time.
Measured in time, how did that work?
If your RPO for the customer database is, say, 1 hour, it means the business is saying we can afford to lose up to 1 hour's worth of transactions or data changes that occurred just before the disaster hit.
Ah, okay, so it dictates backup frequency.
Precisely. RPO directly drives your backup strategy and technology choices. A very tight RPO, maybe just minutes or seconds, requires expensive solutions like continuous data replication or synchronous mirroring. That costs a lot of money. Whereas a more relaxed RPO, maybe 24 hours, might be perfectly fine with just doing traditional tape backups once a day. RPO links business tolerance for data loss directly to technology costs.
Okay, MTD, RTO, RPO.
Yeah.
What's the fourth critical metric? You mentioned it's often forgotten.
It is, and it trips people up. It's the WRT, the work recovery time.
Work recovery time.
This is the time needed after the IT systems are technically back up and running, meaning the RTO has been met, but before the business users can actually resume their normal production work effectively.
Why would there be a delay after RTO is met?
Because just having the servers powered on doesn't mean the data is consistent or trustworthy yet. WRT includes the time needed for operations teams to perform data validation, integrity checks, maybe manually reconcile transactions that occurred around the time of the failure, reestablish queues, test integrations. Basically, all the steps needed to certify that the recovered system and data are reliable and ready for business use.
So you might hit your 4-hour RTO, But if the WRT takes another 2 days to actually validate everything?
Then the business isn't truly functional and back to normal until day 3, effectively. Forgetting WRT in planning can lead to major misalignments in expectations between IT and the business.
Good point. Okay, speaking of recovery and RPO, let's quickly revisit backup strategies. Specifically, can you clarify the operational difference between incremental and differential backups? People mix these up too.
Yeah, they do. Let's start with full. A full backup copies all selected data, regardless of when it last changed, and it usually clears the archive bit on the files it backs up, marking them as backed up.
Okay, simple enough. Now, incremental.
An incremental backup copies only the data that has changed since the last backup of any type, either the last full or the last incremental. And crucially, it also clears the archive bit.
So it only backs up the newest changes. What's the catch?
The catch is the restore process. To restore from incrementals, you need the last full backup plus every single incremental backup taken since that full backup, all in the correct chronological order. If any incremental tape or file is missing or corrupt, you can't restore past that point. Restores can be complex and slow.
Okay. How does differential differ?
A differential backup copies all the data that has changed since the last full backup, regardless of any other differentials taken in between. And here's the key difference. It does not clear the archive bit.
Ah. So the archive bit stays set until the next full backup. What does that mean for restores?
It makes restores much simpler and faster. To restore everything, you only need 2 things: the last full backup tape file and the single most recent differential backup tape file. That's it. You don't need all the intermediate differentials.
So differentials take up more storage space over time compared to incrementals because they keep copying files from the last full.
Correct. Each differential grows larger.
But the restore process is much faster and less complex.
Exactly. It's a trade-off between backup storage time and restore speed simplicity.
And regardless of which method you use, full, incremental, differential, what's the absolute timeless security cautionary tale about backups?
Oh, this one never gets old because people still mess it up. You must test the restoration capability regularly.
Not just test if the backup job completed successfully.
No, that tells you almost nothing useful. Having a backup file sitting on a tape or disk is meaningless if you can't actually restore the data from it when you desperately need it. You need to periodically perform actual test restores, maybe restore a file server to a sandbox environment, restore a database, verify the data integrity. Security isn't about having backups, it's about knowing you can recover.
Excellent point. Now, those RTO and RPA requirements we talked about, they heavily influence the choice of recovery site types. Let's compare the 3 main options organizations use to meet those objectives.
Right, the classic 3 are hot, warm, and cold sites. The fastest, most capable, and naturally most expensive option is the hot site.
What makes it hot?
It's essentially a fully equipped operational data center that often mirrors your primary site's data in near real time. It has all the hardware, software, network links, and data ready to go. You can typically fail over and resume operations from a hot site within minutes or hours, meeting very aggressive RTOs.
Okay, top tier. What about a warm site?
A warm site is the middle ground. It has the basic infrastructure-ready things like power, cooling, HVAC, maybe raised floors, and some network connectivity, but it doesn't have the production servers or current data pre-installed.
So you need to shift hardware and data there.
Exactly. When you declare a disaster, you need to arrange for delivery and setup of your production hardware or compatible hardware and restore your data from recent backups. Recovery takes longer than a hot site, maybe hours to days, suitable for less critical RTOs.
And the last option, the cold site.
A cold site is basically just an empty conditioned space. It provides the shell, the room, the power hookups, the HVAC, maybe basic telecoms, but that's it. There's no hardware, no servers, no network equipment, no data.
So you had to bring everything.
Everything. Acquiring, delivering, installing, configuring all the necessary technology, plus restoring data. It can take weeks or even months to get a cold site fully operational. So it's the cheapest option by far, but only suitable for business functions that can tolerate very long downtimes, very relaxed RTOs.
Hot, warm, cold. Clear trade-offs in cost versus speed. Okay, so you have your DRP written. You've chosen your site type based on RTO. But the plan is useless unless you test it. You mentioned testing backups, but how do you test the entire DRP? There are different types of tests, right?
Yes, and testing the DRP is absolutely non-negotiable. There are generally 5 types of tests ranging from simple reviews to full-blown simulations. They typically increase in complexity and intrusiveness.
Okay, what are the 5?
You start with the planning-focused exercises. The simplest is the read-through test, where team members just read the plan document individually to make sure they understand it. Pretty basic. Next step up is the structured walkthrough, often called a tabletop exercise. Here, the key DRP team members gather around a conference table, and a facilitator presents a disaster scenario. The team talks through their roles and responsibilities according to the plan, step by step. It identifies gaps in the plan itself.
Still talking, not doing.
Right. The third one, the simulation test, gets a bit more active, but still usually avoids impacting production. You might simulate a disaster scenario, maybe using test systems or injecting fake alerts, to see how specific teams or systems respond under simulated pressure. Still primarily a planning validation.
Okay, those first 3 are mostly about reviewing and discussing the plan. What about tests that involve actually doing something?
Now we get into the more complex action-oriented tests. The parallel test is where you actually activate the alternate recovery site, the warm or hot site. You bring it fully online.
While the primary site is still running.
Yes, that's the key. The primary site continues normal production processing. The alternate site is brought up, maybe processes some test data, or even duplicates of live transactions in parallel. This thoroughly tests the alternate site's infrastructure and procedures without risking an interruption to normal business.
Okay, less risky than a full switchover.
Exactly. And the final, most comprehensive, but also the most risky test is the full interruption test.
That's serious.
It is. In this test, you actually shut down the primary production site completely, simulating a real disaster.
Yeah.
All processing, all users, everything is failed over to the alternate recovery site, which must then handle the full production load for a period.
Wow, that truly proves readiness.
It's the ultimate proof, yes. But it also carries significant risk. If the alternate site fails during the test, you have a real outage on your hands. So full interruption tests are done very carefully, usually infrequently, and with extensive planning and executive approval. The key distinction: read-through, walkthrough, simulation are planning talking exercises. Parallel and full interruption involve actually doing the recovery steps.
That's a great way to categorize them. Okay, we started this whole operational journey deep inside the network with change management. Let's wrap up by coming all the way out to the absolute perimeter, the very first layer of operational control: physical security.
Right, can't forget physical security. It's often the first line of defense underpinning everything else. We often think about it in terms of concentric security zones, starting way out at the property line, the standoff perimeter, then maybe the building entrance, then the data center floor, then the server rack itself. Layering applies physically, too.
And specific controls matter here, right? Not just having a fence, but the type of fence.
Absolutely. Details matter. For instance, if you're protecting a high-security facility, the fence specification is critical. You might require heavy-duty, maybe 9-gauge steel wire woven into a tight 1-inch mesh that's difficult to climb or cut quickly.
Okay, what about lighting?
Lighting is crucial for detection and deterrence. You need adequate illumination across the entire perimeter and sensitive areas. Critically, the illumination zones from different light fixtures must overlap. This eliminates dark spots or deep shadows, where an intruder could hide or work undetected. No dead spots.
Overlapping coverage, got it. Moving inside, when we talk about access control beyond just old-fashioned keys, things like cipher locks come up.
Right.
What are the operational advantages there?
Cipher locks, those keyless, programmable electronic locks with a keypad or card reader, offer a lot more operational control and auditing than traditional locks.
How so?
Well, you can easily grant or revoke access without rekeying locks. You get logs of who entered when, and they can offer features like a door delay alarm if someone props the door open too long and alarm sounds. And importantly, many support a duress code.
The dress code.
Yeah. If an employee is being forced by an attacker to open a secure door, they can enter a special predefined duress code instead of their normal code. To the attacker, it looks like the door opened normally, but silently, the system sends a high-priority alarm to the Security Operations Center or police, indicating an emergency situation without alerting the attacker.
That's clever. Very useful. Okay, one final, absolutely critical distinction in physical security operations, one that can literally be a matter of life and death: the difference between fail-safe and fail-secure locks.
This is fundamental. It defines what the lock does when it loses electrical power.
Okay, fail-safe.
A fail-safe lock becomes unlocked when power is cut. The priority here is life safety, allowing people to exit easily during a fire or other emergency, even if the power goes out. You typically find fail-safe locks on building exit doors leading outside. Safety first.
And fail secure.
A fail-secure lock remains locked when power is cut. The priority here is securing the asset being protected. Even if the power fails, the door stays locked, preventing unauthorized access. You'd typically use fail-secure locks on doors to sensitive areas like server rooms, data vaults, or evidence lockers where security overrides safety in a power outage.
So the security team has to carefully choose which type to use based on building codes, life safety requirements, and the value of the asset being protected. It's a balancing act.
Exactly. You have to get that balance right, ensuring safety compliance while still protecting critical assets appropriately.
Wow. Okay, that really brings us full circle. That concludes our very intensive deep dive into security operations, CISSP Domain-7. We've covered a massive amount of ground, from change management all the way through disaster recovery and physical controls.
We really have. We've tried to synthesize a huge body of knowledge today. And I think the recurring theme, hopefully, is that true operational success requires shifting your focus. It's not just about buying the latest shiny security technology. It's about institutionalizing robust, repeatable, auditable procedures. Things like the IR lifecycle, those personnel controls like mandatory vacations, and really establishing and adhering to those non-negotiable business-driven metrics like RTO and RPO. Operations, at its heart, is about disciplined execution and consistency.
Well said. Execution and consistency. Okay, so here is a final provocative thought for you, the learner, to carry forward from this deep dive. We spent quite a bit of time detailing procedures like job rotation, separation of duties, mandatory vacations, controls specifically designed to detect or prevent threats from the human element inside the organization.
The insider threat, malicious or accidental.
Right. And statistics consistently show that the vast majority of security incidents, maybe upwards of 90% by some estimates, trace back somehow to a member of the organization, whether through malicious action, simple error, or falling victim to social engineering.
That human factor is always there.
So, if that's true, how should this overwhelming human element inform your security strategy and, maybe more pointedly, your security budget? Should the emphasis in the spending on robust social engineering awareness training, on rigorously enforcing those administrative controls like SOD and job rotation, which directly target your people? Should that perhaps outweigh the constant spending on just patching the latest software vulnerabilities in your systems? What is the true operational cost and risk of human vulnerability versus technical vulnerability?
Something definitely worth thinking about. Where should the balance lie? Thank you for joining us on the deep dive.
We'll see you next time.